are these people?
Look at my thumbnail.
It looks good.
Now I'm really proud of it now.
It looks good.
So I did. When did I make this? I made this Monday. I modified it last night. But then there really wasn't anything sure at that point. So we're more sure now than we were on Monday when I said, okay, well, we're going to have to do this. But I said that knowing the story at the time was going to develop, and definitely after this, it will continue to develop. So I will preface by saying, as I said earlier, a lot of the information, even now, might be slightly outdated because a lot of the information, the majority of it, I pulled Monday and yesterday. And even today, there's more information came out, and shout out to Reef for helping me with this. We were adding stuff up until just before we went
5 minutes before,
live.
yeah.
Right. So, so as a result of this, it might be a little messy. It might not be as coherent as I would like it to be. But I am a person who, as I said earlier, I'm a person who has a real job. I'm a person that doesn't have a lot of time to watch everything online and try to make everything all clean and all of that kind of stuff to make it more palatable, obviously, for you in order to listen or to watch.
Better than you think. You pull this Monday, it's not going to be too ridiculous.
Right. But I will also be honest to say, some of the takes that I heard about this ceasefire, if you can call it that at all, really bothered me, even among people in our space that should know better. Because a lot of the takes that I'm seeing is that either this was a win for Trump and he's not president yet, like Trump was the deal maker behind the scenes, or Biden actually did something good finally to actually call this ceasefire when now, like days before he's getting the boot. Neither one of them did shit.
No.
And I didn't like the takes that some people had in oh, this makes Trump look good. No, Trump is going to do the exact same shit, if not worse. I'm still holding on to that.
It just happens the Democratic Party will be done. They were already done. They were done in 2016.
But also, as I said, Trump is going to need the police to protect his ass as well as his assets, as well as the assets of his cronies. And don't forget, Biden's cabinet is still made up of Zionist shills, which we reported on as well. So there's absolutely no way they're going to not protect themselves from the onslaught that they're going to get from the masses. And they're counting on the masses to be ignorant because they don't know any better. They don't know all the information that you guys probably know from watching even a little bit of independent media that you do see. So they're going to go out on the streets with all this tech that the police have and going to be pummeled in a lot worse way than they were 4 years ago.
So basically, if you don't take the day it takes to actually look through stuff, go to those sources you trust, see what they're saying, a lot of narrative control is going to be happening, on all sides from everyone. So,
and I'm just afraid even in our space at times tends to use sources that are more corporate or a little bit more mainstream. Like the idea of people pushing for a ceasefire as an all end all. And I said, and I've been very.
We've had that problem forever.
Like a ceasefire is really the floor. Like that's not really what they're looking. So
we've talked to Vanessa Beeley about it. We've talked to Eva about it.
Right.
On air.
People calling
for
a ceasefire, even at the protests that I was going to, was not it. And I said that openly. But that being said, look, I'm not the smartest person, I'm not really a political guy. As I keep saying, I'm a guy that cares and kind of has the understanding that our politics are interwoven into everything that we do. So it's just a matter of just being aware of that and try to make those connections as best as I can. So I don't admit myself to be an expert on really any of this, even though, I just share a lot of people who actually do the work to you here.
Yeah.
I'm very privileged that I have this small of a platform to be able to do that. But that being said, I'm a guy with an opinion, a guy that tries to find patterns in life and try to make those connections. And I try to make opinions based on what I see and what I hear, and kind of having a more cynical mindset in terms of what is really going on. And I have to thank Reef for that, because he's even more cynical than me. So he's able to look at this a little more of a side eye than even I can sometimes.
I didn't think this deal was going to happen at all. So,
well, that being said, let's get into it.
Yep.
So again, this will probably be a messy segment, so forgive me in that. But we hope that we're able to kind of clean it up and it will kind of make sense toward the end. So let's start with, again, this was pulled Monday. This report from Truthout. This was before, actually, this will kind of run into the story that is this deal.
Yep.
So this article was pulled by Truthout, written by, I wouldn't say friend to the show, but she is
frequently brought
Indie Award winner, right?
Yep, I do believe so.
Yep. Sharon Zhang, who reports that Israel-Hamas hostage swap deal close to completion, reports say, and actually that's still probably true. The media has described the deal as a ceasefire, quote unquote, but Israel is demanding it be allowed to continue its attacks. Keep that in mind. We're going to get into that a little later.
Yep.
So Sharon reports, Israel and Hamas are nearing a deal for a hostage swap and temporary pause in fighting, which is exactly what a ceasefire is, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Various sources say, but Israeli leaders are reportedly insisting that any deal allow the military to continue their assault and occupation on Gaza. So in other words, free the hostages, we'll free ours, but we have permission, but we're still going to bomb the shit out of it. Sources from both sides, as well as U.S. officials, said on Monday that negotiations have reached a breakthrough point and a deal may be reached within the next few days, which is now up until day, sort of, I guess. So again, this is keep this with a grain of salt. Again, as I said, this was messy and not sources that we will likely use, but we'll get into better sources later. This is from DropSite, who is, you said, and I didn't know this until prior, is they're associated with Ryan Grimm and them.
Yeah.
So, so not to say they don't do good stuff from time to time, but not sources that we reliably trust.
Yeah.
So keep this with a grain of salt. But
no,
we want to try and bring some
get given
nuance.
Stories by the government to put out,
right?
And a lot of it's fucking dog shit.
But we do want to give some nuance. So I think in essence to kind of understand where we're coming from in terms of this is mostly where a lot of people even in our space are pulling a lot of the information from to report.
Yeah.
Which is what I think is kind of driving some of the takes.
Which is
that
why it's nonsense.
Right. So
from there.
Just to give you that context, I do think it's important for you to kind of make the distinction between what we're kind of saying is to what we consider to be better. So can you zoom in, please?
Yes, sir.
So DropSite reported, this was pulled on Monday, report 3,000 Palestinian captives to be released from Israeli prisons in the proposed deal. A Palestinian source involved in ceasefire negotiations told Drop Site News' Jeremy Scahill that final draft is under discussion from both sides. Hamas has submitted its reports to a framework for a deal that includes new Israeli demands. This draft has now been sent to Israel for approval. While Israel responded positively to some proposals, a full response is still pending. Jakura Fares, I guess that's how you say their name, head of the Palestinian Prisoners Affairs, scroll down, authority, revealed that the proposed agreement would involve the release of over 3,000 Palestinian prisoners, including 200 serving life sentences. Fares is saying that the first stage of the deal would exchange 25 Israeli captives in Gaza for 48 Palestinians previously freed in the 2011 Shalit deal, 200 life-sentenced prisoners, and another 1,000 prisoners, including all women, children, and those with medical conditions currently held in Israeli prisons. While most freed prisoners are expected to return to their homes in Jerusalem, Gaza, and the West Bank if they have any homes left to go to, Fares noted that those serving life sentences may be toted to Qatar, Egypt, or Turkey to avoid assassination threats from Israel. He described this option as both necessary and strategic.
Keep in mind, Qatar and like those three cities are also what helped in the downfall of Syria recently. So
right. Scroll up.
Yep.
Fares also reported that Israel has demanded 9 more captives, including wounded soldiers, be included in the initial phase in exchange for a large number of life-sentenced Palestinian prisoners. These terms remain under negotiation. The Israeli military told Reuters that approximately 6,000 Palestinians from Gaza are currently held in Israeli custody in what human rights group Tselem describes as a network of torture camps, where Israel carries out systematic torture or an abuse and holds detainees in humane conditions, which you just reported in our previous segment. The Palestinian Prisoners Club, in its latest count, reports that Israel is detaining 10,300 Palestinians across its prisons and detention facilities. Of these, 3,376 are being held under administrative detention without any charge or trial. In a conversation with Drop Site News last week, Mohammed Shahad explains that Israel has been detaining hundreds of additional Palestinians to gain leverage in future prisoner swap negotiations. So basically all of that is to kind of give the details as to this swap, quote unquote, that is supposed to be happening.
Got more info from Fee in a bit on that.
So going back to the article, President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly discussed negotiations over the last weekend as negotiators have worked to reach a deal before Donald Trump's inauguration on Monday at the time of this recording. U.S. and other officials have said numerous times over the past months that they're in near an agreement, just for the agreement to fall apart due to Israel's unwillingness to stop its genocide. Media reports have described the pending deal as a ceasefire agreement. That in all should give you pause. The negotiation parties are reportedly still simply negotiating over the ceasefire framework that the Biden administration introduced and that Hamas negotiators accepted in May. Palestinian journalist Mohammed Shahada has pointed out that even the list of captives set to be released is the same that what was discussed in June.
Yeah.
Right. So he gives more information on that in this tweet. The ceasefire swap deal being negotiated now, it's literally the exact same deal Hamas accepted on May 6th and July 2nd last year, what is known as, quote unquote, Biden's proposal. The reason why a deal was never finalized is because Netanyahu has been imposing new last-minute conditions all the time. So it's been basically 8 months of the U.S. pressing Hamas to accept more and more Israeli dictates to get Netanyahu on board, but he keeps adding new ones. For instance, restricting the return of 1 million displaced Gazians to the northern half. The IDF stays in the Tezarine and Philadelphia corridors and eastern buffer zone that constitutes about 33% of Gaza's area, increasing the number of hostages released in the first phase, demanding a list of living Israeli hostages, insisting on exiling many released Palestinian captives, demanding the release of captive IDF soldiers in the first phase instead of the second. Israel creates a new buffer zone in northern Gaza, Beit Hanun and Beit Lahia, installing checkpoints with facial recognition cameras on the routes of Gazians returning to the north. Now, why in the fuck would you do that if you're trying to free them? Yeah. So, insisting on a temporary pause for 8 weeks and then back to war instead of a ceasefire. So remember when Kamala said back in the spring, we want a temporary ceasefire?
Yes.
Pause for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
So you're giving these people the chance to go, and again, home to what? Only for 6 weeks to end, and you're going to blow them up in what is basically rubble at this point. Okay. All of these terms violated Biden's proposal that the UNSC endorsed in June, but Biden never called out Netanyahu and instead chose to cover up his failure/refusal to pressure Israel by putting all the blame on Hamas and quote-unquote rewriting history, as Arab mediators put it. Without pressure on Israel, a deal will never be signed and forever negotiations will be the norm. So,
yep.
Anyway, but reports say that current deal would not involve a permanent ceasefire whatsoever, rather only a pause in fighting. And it's questionable whether Israel would even adhere to the pause, because even as of now, they're not, as negotiators have insisted on keeping troops in Gaza and Israeli forces have reportedly continued violating a ceasefire agreement in Lebanon. The New York Times reports that Netanyahu wants a partial deal that only allows for the release of hostages and that will allow Israel to resume fighting afterward, demanding that language be added to the deal to give Israel the ability to do so. Hamas negotiators have suggested that they will not agree to a deal that doesn't involve the permanent ceasefire. So basically, Netanyahu wants, I want to continue killing them. And the Hamas is saying, no, we actually want you to stop entirely. So that's what has been the impasse always has been. Right. So from the beginning. So, but the idea is like, oh, Hamas was being unreasonable. No. So even more, current hurdles to a deal includes Israel's insistence that it be able to maintain a permanent military presence in Gaza. No. Over a land that Israel has kept enlarging over the course of negotiations. Over the summer, Netanyahu dug his heels in on permanent military occupation on a strip of land along Gaza's border with Egypt, as well as the Netrazim corridor that Israel has used to split Gaza into a northern and southern region. So basically right now, North Gaza is...
Which reminds me again where that canal was supposed to go?
In the north.
Yeah,
which is again destroyed because everyone has basically been pushed down to this. So now Israel is also demanding military control over an expanded buffer zone along Gaza's eastern and northern borders with Israel. Israeli negotiators have asked for a depth of 2,000 meters or over 1.2 miles into the small territory. We believe this means that 60 kilometers or 37 miles of the Gaza Strip will remain under their control and displaced people will not return to their homes, one Hamas negotiator told CNN. Meanwhile, some Israeli officials are opposed to the deal. Financial Minister Bezalel Smotrich, one of the most extremist members of Netanyahu's government, said on Monday that a deal is a catastrophe because it involves the release of Palestinian prisoners, most of whom Israel holds without charges. Smotrich openly called for the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. As you can see in this tweet, which Google had to translate. But he tweeted, the emerging deal is a catastrophe for the national security of the state of Israel. We will not be a part of a surrender deal that would include releasing terrorist hostages, stopping the war, and dissolving its achievements that were brought on with much blood and banding many hostages. This is the time to continue with all of our might to occupy and cleanse the entire strip, to finally take control of humanitarian aid from Hamas, and to open the gates of hell on Gaza until Hamas surrenders completely and all the hostages are returned. So, basically, the worst of the worst are saying no deal.
Yep.
Right. So again, kind of moving forward. So fast forward to yesterday. Again, the deal wasn't made yet, but it looked very close. And there were people online that were being somewhat optimistic about this. So MVP of this segment definitely goes to Fiorella Isabel, friend of the show, whose job is to get all of this right. And beware, there's going to be a lot of tweets from her, because I think there was a lot of what's the word you would say?
Bullshit would be the one I would go with.
I wouldn't say that, but sure.
Misinfo.
So Israel being right. So Israel, Sophie being the saint of common sense, tweeted, Israel angry at Trump for the ceasefire deal. Yeah, with the incoming Aladam-owned most Zionist administration. The goal is to end Palestine. The end of normalizations here. Notice that this happened after Syria's fall. Many getting played like fiddles by political manipulations, which includes many of our friends. So zoom out, please. So she continues, this is like the Ukrainian-Russia talks we've long planned. This next administration will position itself as cleaning up the last. The deal is set in play to give Trump leverage and continue the apartheid, genocidal conditions existing before October 7th, plus focus on the West Bank, which we've talked about, which barely gets any attention in mainstream media. And I'll argue the real prize is the West Bank, because they've been selling that territory this whole time. And we've reported how they essentially want to annex the entire region to Israel right now. But that's what people are not talking about. Go ahead.
Yep. Oh, I was saying that, that's if. He's given no indication he's really willing to do any of those things. He's still willing to fight in Ukraine, still willing to do that, right? Especially with his cabinet the way it is. That's if. Most of the time, if it's going to be anything, it's just going to be smoke screens to act like he's trying.
Right. And we know, especially given the last administration, how Trump is very sensitive to persuasion. It doesn't take a whole lot for Trump to be swayed
in any
way that would benefit him or make him look good. So,
and what makes his friends the most money.
Right.
So, meanwhile,
but anyway, he continues. Israel will continue expanding per the existing Greater Israel Project, now with its HTS terrorists in Syria, leaning the way toward Lebanon, and with an administration ready to go to war with Iran if it can muster the excuse. Syria was harbinger of normalization. One last thing regarding Israel. How many times would some of you forget that every time Israel is angry at Trump or Biden or Trump, We literally continue funding them with billions. How easily duped most continue to be, led by carrots instead of seeing the strings.
Yep.
Hurrah, hooray, hooray for ceasefire. This was, again, Fee. Shout out to Fee because she is speaking prophetically.
Yeah.
Again, she posted this on Tuesday. By today, a lot of people in our space were doing this. Somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
Please,
exactly, mostly what she's saying here. Hooray, hooray, a ceasefire. Trump did what Biden couldn't. We shouldn't have had over a year of genocide, and while you cheer Israel, we'll continue working on the slow death of Palestine and the entire region, backed by the U.S., and then as the long-aligned axis are picked one by one.
Yep.
So I pulled this because this was from a thread that I was having with Savvy. So Jason Chukwuma said, if Bibi concedes on Gaza, it's because he wants to be in Trump's good graces for the real prize, annexation of the West Bank. He wanted to do it during Trump's first term, but got too much pushback. There won't be any more of that this time. So he tweeted this article. I assume it's from the Washington Post.
Yeah.
Actually, if you go up, Netanyahu facing tough Israel election pledges to annex a third of West Bank, which was published in 2019.
2019. Okay, good. Great.
So,
glad no one
actually,
listened.
we'll go into that a little bit because as I said, I feel the West Bank right now is really the grand prize here. So this is from the Middle East Eye. We're going to get into Smotrich in this now, where they write, here Aladam reports, Israel and Smotrich takes measures to fast-track West Bank settlement building. Weekly meetings established by Financial Minister Bezalel Smotrich are expected to significantly raise the amount of land seizures in this year. Smotrich has taken new measures to ensure the acceleration of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank with minimal U.S. involvement or political approval. Now, can you imagine Trump preventing this? No. Smotrich has been seeking to expand land seizures through occupied Palestinian territory, outlawed under international law, by a new mechanism that will allow for weekly settlement building permits, which previously took months to be approved. According to the Israeli newspaper Yedioth Ahronoth,
Ynet.
Did I say it right?
Yep.
These measures have been taken despite U.S.-Israeli tensions over illegal settlements and violent settler activity, as well as guidelines set by the United States that allow Israel to build a few settlements only near the designated green line. Can you scroll up? Because, This 1949 armistice line is an area that separates the Palestinian territories of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip from Israel. Niet reported that Smotrich Settlement Administration, which is responsible for land seizures in the West Bank, aims at normalizing settlement planning by holding meetings on a weekly basis where discussions would lead to the approval of new settlements. So again, this is planning to happen this year. So you can argue with Biden, this has been somewhat limited, but Trump will give this
green lights.
Will give
everywhere.
no fucks about this. So he will just be like, go ahead. Like, increase the settlements. In the past, land grabs took months to be approved, and meetings to discuss such decisions were held once every 3 months. The weekly committee meetings are expected to significantly raise the amount of land seizures in 2025 compared to previous years. In the past week alone, so this article was written also yesterday, I believe, around 440 housing units were processed to be approved. Moreover, the building of 2,377 units have been advanced by the Supreme Planning Council in just the last 6 weeks. The Peace Now movement, one of the largest in Israel working to promote a two-state solution, bullshit, but has criticized the large-scale settlement construction in the West Bank, noting that this is a result of policies introduced by the Netanyahu-Smotrich government. This systematic approach aims to normalize settlement planning and attract less public and international attention and criticism, the self-proclaimed left-wing Zionist group added. Settlement infrastructure, which has been carved out of lands only Israeli citizens are allowed to access, have been described by several human rights groups as a system of apartheid. The green line mentioned in the U.S. regulations on settlements has been hugely controversial among far-right Israelis who have been outraged by how slow they perceived settlement construction to be. It's observed that we have to wait long months to promote construction in approved locations, and no one was bothered by it. Now, fundamental changes are being made that bring normalcy to 500,000 residents. A cell official told you again, this is happening now.
Yep.
Like, you think a ceasefire is happening, folks? Since the 1967 Middle East War, Israel has decided to omit the Green Line from its maps, making the Palestinian territories it has occupied appear as being part of the state. Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank are legal under international law. However, Israel has continued to build settlements across the occupied territory over the past several decades. Around 700,000 Israeli settlers live in roughly 300 illegal settlements in the West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem, all of which have been built since Israel captured the territories in the 1967 conflict. Smotrich has been spearheading this trend. In October, he called for an aggressively expansionist Israeli policy, saying the country should expand little by little until its borders reach the Syrian capital of Damascus. Meanwhile, on Monday, Israeli Housing Minister Yitzhak Goldachov called on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to facilitate the illegal settlement of 1 million Jews in the occupied West Bank. Speaking to a Hebrew site, Bashir al-Hadim, which covers news related to Haredi Jews, Goldachov urged Netanyahu to bring 1 million Jews to Judea and Samaria, the Israeli term for the West Bank. Gorbachev also called for the Gaza onslaught to be leveraged to ramp up settlement and construction of the area.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'll take this if you want. So,
sure, go ahead.
Here's Fee posting today, right? And this is a thread everyone should go retweet and like if you can. But she says, breaking, a ceasefire and hostage deal between Israel and Hamas has been reached following the Qatari PM's meeting with Hamas and Israeli negotiators. Comes into effect in 24 hours, and Qatar, Egypt, and the U.S. will guarantee it. Quote, Israel will vote on it Thursday. Here are my terms and my opinions. So here are terms and my opinions. So we'll get to this. So first clause, the complete withdrawal of Israeli forces to the borders from all areas of the Gaza Strip. Second clause, the opening of the Rafah crossing and the complete withdrawal from it. Third clause, Israel must facilitate the travel of the wounded for treatment abroad. So those seem pretty decent. Sixth clause, Israel must allow the entry of 608 trucks daily under humanitarian protocol sponsored by Qatar. Right?
That should be at minimum.
Yes.
At minimum.
Right. Israel must allow, and there's again issues with Qatar, so Israel must allow for the entry of 200,000 tents and 60,000 caravans for the urgent shelter. Eighth clause, a prisoner exchange, including the release of 1,000 prisoners from Gaza and hundreds of detainees serving life sentences of lengthy terms. So she's just laying out some of these facts real quick. Ninth clause, all displaced persons must return to their residential areas and their freedom of movement throughout the Gaza Strip must be guaranteed. 10th clause, all hostile aircraft must leave the skies over the Gaza Strip for 8 to 10 hours daily. All hospitals must be rehabilitated and field hospitals must be permitted entry into the Gaza Strip, as well as medical and surgical teams. So that's that. But She also says that Netanyahu's government has stated this isn't final. Very clear. Right. Other potential additions have included clearing the occupation prisons of all women and children under 19 years old. Israeli withdrawal from the Netzarim corridor and the Philadelphia corridor is up for debate because the AP says Hamas dropped this while others say otherwise. So that could cause some wrenches in this overall anyway. The first phase will last 42 days in exchange for the delivery of 33 Israeli prisoners, including living and dead bodies. Israel would release 30 Palestinian prisoners for each civilian hostage and 50 for each female soldier. Supposed into fighting, while Israeli forces would move out of populated areas to the edges of the strip, displaced Palestinians would allegedly begin returning home as more aid enters the strip. The second phase is 42 days, declaration of sustainable calm, whatever that means. Hamas frees remaining male hostages, soldiers and civilians in exchange for yet to be negotiated number of Palestinian prisoners and a full withdrawal of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip. Phase 3, the bodies of deceased Israeli hostages would be exchanged for bodies of deceased Palestinian fighters. An alleged implementation of a reconstruction plan in Gaza in exchange for a 3 to 5 year reconstruction plan be carried out in Gaza under international supervision, and the crossings for movement and in and out of Gaza would be reopened.
Right.
Here's fees, opinions.
These are the same plans. We've talked about those. That we've talked about that over the summer. That those were the plans that Hamas approved.
Yep.
More or less, and Israel's like, nah. So these are, as we reported earlier, pretty much exactly the same as it was back then.
Yep. So, Fee's problem with this, and it's not to take the joy away from stopping any of the physical bombs and slayings of Palestinians, which I, of course, with many, welcome, but to point out the reality, which the fact she even has to say that, like, right. You know.
Look, and we'll I'll save that because
I'd love to be overly hopeful.
I will get more into that toward the end, though. So,
but the reality, one, Israel hasn't respected any ceasefire and is under no obligation to do so because there's been zero fucking consequences when it doesn't.
Right. Two, and I go ahead.
Go ahead. Israel has not. Yes. Yep.
That's key. It's the idea of like, if Israel doesn't do it, what's the
consequences?
What consequences?
Right.
There are none.
Yeah.
And there's, and again, kind of going back to what I was saying in the last segment, this stuff, while nice, it's really the floor.
Yeah.
It's the idea of like, arrest Bibi for at least his complicity in war crimes as of now, and along with his cabinet, like arrest any Israeli guard responsible for torturing these Palestinians put in prison. Fuck over the IDF, dismantle it, whatever you want, however you want. Like,
yeah,
there should be a fire of justice coming down hard on Israel right now. But right now, it just seems like just return the hostages and rebuild, and that's it. If that, and give them food. That's it. That's not going to get even, like, there has to be accountability. There has to be a turning in terms of how Israelis feel about Palestinians. You can argue vice versa, but you need to argue that there needs to be an actual mental thing that needs to occur, which is partly due to the poison that is Zionism that needs to be completely destroyed, which obviously that's going to take a lot longer, but that also needs to be mentioned. And the fact that they don't mention it here, you're only going to perpetuate a lot of these racist and genocidal tendencies that is going to keep going Like, just building infrastructure, rebuilding it is not going to be enough if you're not restructuring your mindset as well, which again, which you're not getting into here. So
2, Israel has not given assurances. In fact, Netanyahu has threatened Israel could use new military action to pressure Hamas in negotiations or could resume its military campaign. So open reason for them to just go right back to what they were doing. So 3, Netanyahu's office said in a statement that it hopes details will be worked out by Wednesday night, Thursday, with the plan still needing approval from the Netanyahu security cabinet and his full cabinet, which is likely to approve what he proposed, but not a guarantee.
So if you're watching this as of now, because it's Wednesday night, now we haven't heard anything, at least not yet. If you have in the comments, let us know.
Yeah. So let me also go find this again. So supposedly Qatar, the US, and Egypt would provide guarantees. This is followed, though. The problem is the US funds Israel expansion and genocide. Egypt is controlled by the US and Israel to the point of closing the Rafah crossing, and Qatar has deep relations with the West, as is, which let me go find his tweet because I apparently didn't grab the full thing. But Donald Trump's being hailed as one who reached this, but it looks like it's been the plan for a while, meaning that the Biden admin, to start it all, set it out to end it now for a reason. Trump can gloat as he is, but this was clearly set in motion now for a reason, which that's my thing, is what are those reasons? You know? So, but any thoughts so far, Care Bear? While I go look for this?
No, I mean, again, it's just, how are you going to ensure that Israel is going to do any of that? And again, a lot of this, I guess at best, is over, like, after these phases where it's like a few weeks. Like, the rebuild is like 3 to 5 years. I would argue it's probably going to really, if you really wanted to do a good job at this point, considering how decimated Gaza is, at least 10. Like, I'm not sure of like how long it would take to build, like, given we've seen the pictures. Like,
right.
I would imagine it would take decades to rebuild everything that they had to how it was before. And again, that does not even include the mental trauma that a lot of these people, again, these are a lot of children.
Oh, for sure.
That if they're alive, will have to rehabilitated, because right now they're having I don't want to say an extremist mindset, but they're not going to have great feelings about what has been happening to that homeland right now. So there's still going to be a lot of that anger and pain sentiment among these kids. So, which is, I think, part of the reason, the justification that we don't want to get out entirely, because there's still this threat of, like, again, the idea of like a Palestinian leader rising up from the ashes, so to speak. So that's why they're kind of saying, we'll pull out for a little bit, but we want the opportunity to bomb them should, and I'm going to say like a Jesus-like figure, like,
pops up
arises
again
from this. Right.
So the problem in these U.S. funds Israel's expansion and genocide. Egypt is controlled by the U.S. and Israel to the point of closing the Rafah crossing, and Qatar has deep relations with the West, as well at the expense of Palestine. None of the Gulf states would have done much to help Gaza. How could this be fair? It wouldn't be. So, number 7, the Lebanese election with an anti-Hezbollah leader as victor leaves the country vulnerable as it stands off with Israel. Worth noting that Hezbollah has never only relied on the political wing and will continue fighting. It's just going to be more difficult re-Syria. Yes, Israel has lost many soldiers and has not achieved its goals of eliminating Hamas, but they have killed hundreds of thousands in Palestine. Hold on, let me find it in my thing.
You have to do it for the next one too.
So Israel has lost many soldiers, has not achieved its goal of eliminating Hamas, but they've killed hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and not received a single punishment, but rather support from the West and little condemnation from the non-aligned Axis, save a few under the mantle of Judaism for them and terrorism for Hamas. It's no coincidence that we're seeing this all happen now with a change of face in the U.S., while the same long-planned foreign policy will continue. Number 9. No one's talking about the fact that Israel's been taking up more and more land in the occupied West Bank with the help of the PA. Funny that, we're going to get to that in the next segment, Fee. It's only a matter of time before they fully take over unless there's a miraculous push to stop Israel in the U.S., which, looking at Syria, is unlikely. Number 10. It's obvious. The obvious elephant in the room is the incoming Trump admin has the most Zionist cabinet Fee has ever seen. People who think Gaza should be flattened have I Love Israel X bios, not to mention the million in Adelson money. This doesn't magically go away because of a highly political manipulated deal. That's naive. I keep mentioning Syria because this will be the key for us all, especially analysts, to understand how our wishes do not reflect reality. Without Syria, things for the Axis have become realistically incredibly difficult and devastating, and I believe this will bring an era of normalization. Iran's Pezeshkian isn't the only one in charge, but his tendencies towards liberalism don't serve the resistance's interests for the country or of the Axis and non-aligned Axis. Iran is also vulnerable with the Trump administration, which is already vilified and accused it of everything from election interference to assassination attempts and bringing bombs over the border. It will be a focus for the incoming administration. This also has been long planned. The question is, will Iran, as it seems from some statements, normalize relations with Washington or continue to stand their ground? Will DC see Pezeshkian as an opponent to pounce? It seems likely. 13. In summary, it's too early to tell what the ceasefire actually is, but what I see coming from any ceasefire the U.S. and Israel agree to is the return to pre-October 7th treatment of Palestinians, while continuing to slow death of Gaza and quicker takeover of the entire region. Nothing, as I stated, happens coincidentally, and timing is everything. After Syria, nothing will be the same, and I don't exaggerate the levels of betrayal we are seeing on many facets of non-aligned Axis. More will be revealed in due time, I'm sure. So, definitely wanted to bring Fee's stuff on this. You brought this, right?
Yeah. Which, honestly, if we were doing this segment in under 5 minutes,
it would just be this?
Just be this.
I don't remember if I got Pasta's tweet, but I'll bring that as well, because it pertains. I thought I grabbed it. Come on, tweets, do the thing. Hopefully, come on. Does anybody really buy this BS? Israel has gained territory in Lebanon and Syria. They have either killed or displaced almost half the population of Gaza. Trump set the table for all these actions of the Zionist nation, and you believe that he's to be celebrated? This was all set up to dupe you, and it's working.
Yes.
So, good stuff from Pasta, you know. You brought this, I think.
Yeah, some diplomatic disaster. History will write of breakthroughs that were strategically timed and territories exchanged under the guise of peace. Ceasefire should heal wounds, not redraw maps in the shadows of diplomacy. I agree.
Fee added an hour ago. By the way, in case you all missed this, Trump said that he would use the ceasefire deal as momentum to expand the Abraham Accords, U.S.-backed agreement struck during his first presidency in 2017 that normalized Israel's relation with several Arab countries. So that's also a factor. In Lakesh's, Israel launches a large series of airstrikes on Gaza City after the ceasefire announcement, immediately after news emerged that Israeli soldiers were killed in Beit Hanun, The ceasefire is yet to go in effect, and Israel often ramps up its massacres at this time. Yep, they try to get their licks in before they can't, or they got to take a break, you know?
Right.
So, and this bit I put in South Lebanon, Israel's war is not finished. So while this may be a ceasefire for however long it's going to be a ceasefire, they're still bombing other places. So, you know, not everything is as it seems. More
from fee.
And the Zionist entity and the most Zionist administration, funded by AIPAC and Adelson, wouldn't agree to a ceasefire that did not ultimately benefit them and Washington's ambitions. Be for fucking real. So, yeah. Daniel Fuchs thought for the day: never trust Israel, never trust Trump, never trust the U.S. So, words to live by. Sam Husseini: Palestinians getting killed even as they celebrate an apparent halt to their slaughter. So, yeah, I wouldn't celebrate this just yet.
Well, I'm going to give nuance to that later.
Yes, there's definitely some reasons to celebrate, but I think they're like short term.
Short term, right.
This Kavork, the ceasefire agreement will not erase Israeli actions in Gaza. The struggle for justice must continue until everyone between the river to the sea is recognized and treated with dignity as a human being. Patrick Henderson, 2 hours ago, when I pulled this, there won't be a ceasefire. So that's his statement. He doesn't think that they're going to cease fire. So I'm kind of with him on that. Newbot
Chris Hedges: Israel, going back decades, has played the same duplicitous game. It signs a deal with the Palestinians that is to be implemented in phases. The first phase gives Israel what it wants, in this case, the release of the hostages, but Israel habitually fails to implement subsequent phases that would lead to a just and equitable peace. Hamas is seeking a permanent ceasefire, but Israel says it retains the right to re-engage militarily. There is no agreement about who will govern Gaza. Israel has made it clear that the continuance of Hamas in power is unacceptable. There's no mention of the status of UNRWA, the UN agency that Israel has outlawed and that provides the bulk of the humanitarian aid to the Palestinians, most of whom have been displaced. There is no agreement on the reconstruction of Gaza, much of which lies in rubble. And of course, there is no route to an independent and sovereign Palestinian state. There are many, many ways this can fall apart, as I expect it eventually will. But let us rejoice that, at least for the moment, the mass slaughter has stopped. So
Sunday, not right now, you know.
Well, again, I want to give some nuance to this.
Yep.
Let me see if I can. Is that it? So to kind of end this somewhat, and to bring some goodness to all of this, here's a tweet from Miss Faustina, who, when Palestinian children heard about the ceasefire, obviously, here's their response.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, I said I should have put my tweet up, but I pulled this instead, which is better. Sami Obid, who actually I saw his show last month. Great. If he comes to your city, please go see him. He's half Palestinian, so I'll give him the right to say this. But he said, I am overwhelmed with joy from watching the people of Gaza smile and rejoice with the news of a ceasefire deal. That is all I want to feel today. We can talk the reality of it tomorrow. So I will give him that. I will give these children that. As I said earlier in a tweet, I am not going to deny any Palestinians who want to celebrate. They can and should. But I think for the rest of us, it's the idea of like, it's literally what it is, a brief respite. Brief. Because we're going to have hell to pay come soon. So I just believe we need to be a lot more measured in our response to this. Because again, I saw a lot of people say that Trump did what Biden couldn't. Biden was good in actually getting this done. Both of them are biggest Zionist shills in our government today. They didn't do shit. They only did what they needed to do to make themselves look good. At the end of the day, as we reported, and I think Svi said this best, it's just going to go back to pre-October 7th when no one was talking about Gaza except for maybe a few people online, and it wasn't mainstream. They're going to continue doing what they were doing, but they won't have the attention that they've received up for the last year. So, and again, as I said, unless you're talking about full Palestinian liberation, and I said this to you, offline, unless there's talk about such like reparations for the Palestinian people, this is bullshit. It's just nothing more than a brief pause. And as you saw, like, I'm not going to take away the children's story. If they want to celebrate, let them. Or anyone who wants to celebrate, let them. But don't use the talking point of our government actually doing something. They didn't do shit, because it's going to go back to the status quo at some point. And I think this tweet sums up what we're saying the best. It's still free Palestine until Palestine is free.
Yep.
And I think, as I said, that's where we should end. So again, hopefully that made a lot of sense to you all. And I am speaking not necessarily to my ignorance, but speaking to, funny enough, like we've reported a lot on Israel, Gaza, this whole region for the past year. I still don't consider myself an expert in this. Like, there's a lot, even in just reporting, even just tonight, that we still don't know. So I felt like in talking with Reef and Indy over the last couple of days about this as I was pulling the story together, and thank you, Reef, for even pulling out the stuff that even today, as I was working and trying to get things ready for the show tonight, this just proves, especially like with news, that things change at a dime of a hat. And, I want to be more concerned about, I think the concern is having the right take or having the right look in stories versus actually reporting the truth. And it's sad that I think even people in our space, some of the takes that they had, I think, kind of missed the mark in terms of what the reality is, especially for those who've been reporting on this that should know better, that did so in a way that kind of overstates what our government is doing and kind of understates the reality of what is going to happen regardless of who's in it. Yep. So I just say, moving forward, let's just take a measured and more nuanced response, and to, as I said via tweet, proceed with caution. If you care to celebrate like a brief respite, fine. Totally get that. But understand that this is more or less a gaslight in terms of what is going to continue happening regardless of who did what. Because Gaza is still in rubble. West Bank is still being occupied. Syria is basically taken over. And this country is shit.
Yeah.
And that's why, even just saying that, we are demonetized. So if you would like to support us and continue and to help us continue to report on stories like these, please scan the QR code if you have a smartphone that you see on your screen, or you can type in the link that you see at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're in our YouTube chat, you can type in ! the actual symbol, donate, all one word, and the link will pop up, and you can donate to our Ko-fi account. You can donate as little as $1, and that will, any amount helps in terms of pushing independent media. Actually, we should. Indy says, what does he say? Like, user-funded media, I think is the term that Indy uses.
Yeah.
Which I think, yeah, because not all independent media is truly independent, really, at this point. So
money, please.
But regardless, obviously we know that times are tight for many people, and money is hard to come by for a lot of folks. So the free option that we hope all of you do regardless is like and subscribe, and please share our content to help fight the suppression that we see on YouTube, and to make sure you leave a comment. We definitely want to hear your thoughts on this quote-unquote ceasefire, what you think of it, what do you think is actually going to happen moving forward. Do you consider this a win for either Biden or Trump? Let us know. We do read them, and your comments actually help us determine what we should talk about in future segments. Please help us get to free K. YouTube, I think, is openly trying to decrease our numbers. So, by the way, if you just check to see if you are subscribed to us, check to see if you still are, because I think YouTube is doing shenanigans on us. So, but regardless, we want to continue growing, and your feedback and your subscribing and you sharing our content helps us allegedly be pushed in the algorithm. And thanks for watching.